This story is titled, My Cheating Wife Proposed an Open Marriage. Now she's jealous that I'm dating her best friend. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. When I met Emily, I wasn't even looking for love. I was 27, fresh out of college with a business degree and laser focused on growing my construction company in Denver. I didn't have time for distractions, especially not dating. But Emily? She was impossible to ignore. It was a random Tuesday afternoon, and I had stopped by this little coffee shop I'd found near one of my work sites. I wasn't planning to linger. I had deadlines, client meetings, and a crew waiting for me. But Emily was there, standing in front of me in line, chatting up the barista like they were old friends. She was magnetic. Everyone in the shop seemed to be paying attention to her, even though she was just talking about an upcoming concert she wanted to go to. When it was her turn to order, she asked for some overly complicated drink with a million substitutions and still managed to pull it off as charming. Normally, that kind of thing would have annoyed me. I'm a plain black coffee guy. But with her, it was different. She had this energy that made you feel like everything in the world could be exciting if you looked at it the way she did. I didn't even realize I was staring until she turned around, caught my eye, and smiled. I froze, fumbling to pretend I wasn't just gawking at her. But she didn't seem to mind. Instead, she laughed and said, "Looks like you could use more than just caffeine today." I don't know what came over me, but I actually laughed back. Something I rarely did with strangers. "Yeah, it's been a long day, and it's not even noon yet," I replied. She didn't let the conversation end there. By the time we both got our drinks, she had somehow managed to make me feel like I'd known her forever. She was one of those people who could hold a conversation effortlessly, even with a total stranger. Before I left, she slipped me her number on a napkin. "Call me sometime," she said casually, like it wasn't a big deal. But for me, it was. I don't think I've ever texted someone so fast in my life. Our first date was dinner at this cozy Italian place she picked. It was the kind of spot I'd usually avoid because it seemed too trendy and overpriced, but with her, it didn't matter. We talked for hours about everything. Her dream of starting her own graphic design studio, my goals for my business, even our childhoods. She made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world, even though she was the one with the stories that could make anyone laugh. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again. Things moved fast after that. Within months, we were inseparable. We'd spend weekends hiking in the Rockies, binge-watching terrible reality TV, or just driving around Denver talking about our future. She had this way of making every moment feel like an adventure, even if we were just grocery shopping or folding laundry. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had someone who truly understood me. A year later, we got married. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family, but it felt perfect. Emily walked down the aisle looking like she had stepped out of a magazine, and I couldn't believe someone like her had chosen me. At the time, I thought I was the luckiest guy in the world. No prenup because I was young, in love, and convinced nothing could go wrong. For a while, I was right. We settled into married life, bought a house in the suburbs, and started building our dream life. When Ava was born 2 years later, Emily decided to stay home full-time. She was the kind of mom who went all out. Homemade Halloween costumes, over-the-top birthday parties, and Pinterest-worthy school projects. I couldn't have been prouder of her. By the time Liam came along, we were a well-oiled machine. I worked long hours to grow my company, often putting in 12-hour days to make sure we could afford the life we wanted. Meanwhile, Emily handled everything at home. She had a natural knack for juggling the chaos of 2 kids while still making it look easy. To anyone looking in from the outside, we were the perfect family. And for years I thought we were. But as time went on, little cracks started to show. At first, I ignored them. I told myself it was just the stress of raising 2 kids and running a business. Everyone has ups and downs, right? Emily started spending more time on her phone, but I didn't think much of it. She'd laugh at texts and say things like, "Oh, it's just Sarah," when I asked what was so funny. But then there were the small changes I couldn't explain away, like the way she'd get defensive when I asked about her plans, or how she started making comments about how boring our life had become, or how we don't have as much fun as we used to. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase. After all, we still had so much good in our lives. We had 2 amazing kids, a beautiful home, and the kind of partnership most people dream of. I thought those little cracks were just that. Small, insignificant things that would pass with time. But later, I could see that those were the first signs of something much bigger. I just didn't want to see it. I wanted to believe we were untouchable, that nothing could shake the foundation we'd built together. Looking back, I should have known something was off. Emily's girls' nights out had been happening more and more often. She'd come home late, sometimes after midnight, and head straight to the shower like she couldn't wait to wash the night off. I wanted to trust her. After all, she was my wife. But the little inconsistencies started piling up. One time, she mentioned going to a bar downtown with Sarah and Amanda, two of her friends. Later that week, I casually brought it up while talking to Sarah's husband, Greg, at a school event. He gave me a weird look and said, "Emily went to the bar?" Sarah was home with the kids that night. I brushed it off, convincing myself it must have been a miscommunication. Maybe Sarah left early, or maybe Greg just didn't know what she was up to. But deep down, it planted the first seed of doubt. Emily also started acting differently around the house. She'd go out of her way to be overly nice after her nights out, like making my favorite dinner, or giving me little compliments she hadn't said in years. At first, I appreciated it. I thought maybe she was trying to put more effort into our marriage. But then I realized it wasn't about us. It was guilt. Her phone became another red flag. Emily had always been an open book with her phone, leaving it lying around the house or handing it to me to play videos for the kids. But suddenly she started keeping it close, even bringing it into the bathroom when she showered. She turned off the notifications on her lock screen, something she'd never done before. I remember jokingly asking, "What? You got state secrets on there?" She just laughed it off, but the look on her face was anything but amused. One night, after she came back from another girls' night, I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But this time, something told me to look. It wasn't just a gut feeling. It was a heavy, nagging suspicion that I couldn't shake. I glanced at the screen, and there it was. A text from someone named Mark. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Tonight was incredible." My heart started pounding. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, my brain trying to make sense of what I'd just read. Part of me wanted to believe it was a joke or some misunderstanding, but I knew better. I picked up her phone, unlocked it, and scrolled through the thread. What I found made my stomach turn. The messages were explicit, the kind of stuff you can't unsee. They'd been meeting up for months, sneaking around behind my back. There were even pictures, selfies of the two of them, cozy together in places I recognized. One was taken in a restaurant we'd been to for our anniversary just a year ago. Another was at a park where we used to take the kids. It wasn't just the betrayal of her being with someone else. It was the fact that she'd brought this guy into parts of our life that were supposed to be ours. For a moment, I just stood there, holding her phone, my mind racing. I felt sick, angry, and humiliated all at once. How long had she been lying to me? How could she smile at me, kiss me, and act like everything was fine while sneaking around with this guy? When Emily came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel and humming to herself, I was still standing in the kitchen. She froze when she saw me holding her phone. "Max," she said, her voice faltering. I didn't give her a chance to play dumb. "You want to explain this?" I asked, holding up the phone. Her face went pale. For a second, I thought she might try to deny it, but instead, she just stood there, speechless. "Nothing to say?" I pressed. My voice was calm, but inside I was seething. Finally, she stammered, "Max, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out like this." Like this? That's what she was worried about? Not the fact that she'd been cheating, but that I found out? I shook my head in disbelief. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated and then finally said, "A few months." I could tell she was lying. The messages went back further than that. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you do this?" Her excuses came pouring out. "I don't know. Things between us haven't been the same. You're always working." And I felt lonely. Mark makes me feel alive again. Alive. That word cut deeper than anything else she'd said. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I snapped. "If you were unhappy, why didn't you say something instead of sneaking around like a coward?" Her response floored me. "I didn't want to hurt you, Max. I love you. I love our family. I just needed something more. Needed something more. Like I wasn't enough. Like the life we'd built together wasn't enough. I wanted to yell, to throw something, to storm out and never look back. But I couldn't. The kids were upstairs, probably playing or reading in their rooms, completely unaware of what was happening. I couldn't let them see their dad lose it. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "So what now, Emily? You think we just go back to normal?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "No, but we can make this work. We don't have to throw everything away." I laughed bitterly. "Make it work? How? You think I can just forget what you've done?" She hesitated, and then said something I'll never forget. "We could try an open marriage." I stared at her, stunned. She wasn't apologizing or begging for forgiveness. She was proposing a way to keep seeing this guy while staying married to me. "You've got to be kidding," I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. "Max, it doesn't mean I don't love you," she said, like that would somehow make it better. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want to break up our family." I almost laughed in her face. The sheer audacity of it was unbelievable. But as much as I wanted to tell her to pack her bags and get out, I knew I couldn't. Without a prenup, she'd take everything. The house, the kids, my business, it would all be on the line. So I swallowed my pride and said, "Fine. If that's what you want, we'll try it." Her face lit up, like she thought she'd won. But I wasn't agreeing because I forgave her. I was agreeing because I needed time. Time to figure out how to protect myself and my kids. Time to plan my way out of this mess. This wasn't going to be my life forever. Not a chance. After Emily's open marriage proposal, you'd think she'd at least try to hide her affair out of respect or guilt. Nope. She jumped headfirst into her relationship with Mark like I hadn't just found out she was cheating. It was almost comical how little she cared to keep up appearances. She'd leave the house in the same dress she'd worn the night I confronted her, throwing a quick, "Don't wait up," over her shoulder as she headed out the door. At first, I let her think I was just going along with it, but I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. I had no intention of staying in this mess forever. I started building my case, knowing full well that if this ever ended up in court, I needed to be ready. Family law is notoriously slanted toward mothers, and the last thing I wanted was to lose custody of Ava and Liam to someone who spent more time texting her boyfriend than parenting. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. I knew it sounded extreme, but I needed evidence, something concrete to show how much time she spent neglecting her responsibilities as a wife and mother. I told the PI to focus on her outings with Mark, and let me tell you, the guy was thorough. Within a week, he handed me photos of Emily and Mark out at restaurants, sneaking kisses in parking lots, and even checking into a hotel together. While the PI did his thing, I doubled down on being present for the kids. Not because I wanted to weaponize them, but because I genuinely loved being their dad. I started volunteering to coach Liam's soccer team and made sure I never missed one of Ava's ballet recitals. On weekends, I'd take them to the park or on little day trips to keep things fun and normal for them. I even started packing their lunches for school, slipping in little notes like, "You're awesome," or "Good luck on your spelling test," just to remind them I was there for them. Emily, meanwhile, was oblivious to everything I was doing. She seemed more focused on maintaining her romance with Mark than on what was happening under her own roof. She'd half-heartedly ask how the kids were doing, but it was clear her mind was elsewhere. I started keeping a journal to document it all. Every missed dinner, every late night, every time she brushed off the kids to go run errands that conveniently took her hours. While all this was going on, something unexpected happened. Chloe, Emily's best friend, reached out to me. At first, it was just to check in. She said she'd heard about the open marriage and wanted to see how I was holding up. I didn't think much of it at first, but as we kept talking, it became clear that Chloe had her own opinions about Emily's behavior. "She's always been self-centered, Max," Chloe said during one of our conversations. "I don't know how you've put up with it for so long." Hearing someone else say it, especially someone close to Emily, was validating. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. Our conversations started off casual, but over time, they grew more personal. Chloe opened up about her own frustrations with Emily, saying she'd noticed the cracks in our marriage long before I had. She told me Emily had a way of taking people for granted and that she thought I deserved better. I wasn't sure if it was genuine sympathy or something more, but I felt like someone actually cared about what I was going through, and it was nice. One night, Chloe and I ended up meeting for coffee. I told myself it was just to vent, someone to talk to who wasn't directly involved in the chaos of my home life. But as we sat there talking, I realized how easy it was to be around her. She wasn't judging me or telling me to stick it out for the kids. She was just there, listening. That coffee turned into more frequent meetups. Before I knew it, we were hanging out regularly, grabbing lunch, going for walks, or just sitting in the car talking for hours. It felt good to have someone on my side, someone who saw me for who I am. And yeah, I'll admit it, there was chemistry. A lot of it. The turning point came one night when Chloe invited me over to her place. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't think it would feel so natural. We talked, laughed, and eventually things took a turn I didn't see coming. I felt wanted. Not out of guilt or obligation, but because someone genuinely liked me for me. I knew it wasn't exactly the most ethical thing to be doing, but considering the circumstances, I didn't lose sleep over it. Emily wanted an open marriage, and I was just playing by her rules. Of course, I wasn't flaunting it, but I also wasn't going to beat myself up over it. Eventually, Emily found out. I didn't tell her, and Chloe didn't either. But I guess she started putting the pieces together when she noticed how much time I was spending out of the house. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Are you seeing someone?" she demanded, her tone more accusatory than concerned. I didn't bother lying. "Yeah, Chloe." Her face turned red. "Chloe? My best friend? How could you?" I raised an eyebrow. "How could I? You're really asking me that? Look in the mirror, Emily." She looked like she was about to explode. "This isn't the same thing," she yelled. "You're supposed to be my husband. And you're supposed to be my wife," I shot back. "But you gave that up when you started sneaking around with Mark. Don't act like you're the victim here." She stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence sink in. For the first time, I felt like I'd taken back a little bit of control. Emily wanted to play games? Fine. But I wasn't going to let her call the shots anymore. After that, things got colder between us. Emily stopped pretending to be nice, and I stopped pretending to care. The house became a battlefield of silent standoffs and awkward encounters. The only thing that kept me grounded was the kids. And, if I'm being honest, Chloe. She was my escape, my reminder that there was life beyond the mess Emily had created. I knew it couldn't stay like this forever. Something had to give. But I was content to keep playing the game, knowing full well that I was laying the groundwork for the next chapter of my life. Here's the thing. I could see the cracks in Emily's relationship with Mark long before she did. At first, their little romance had all the hallmarks of an affair. Secrecy, sneaking around, and that forbidden thrill they probably thought made it so special. But once the open marriage card was on the table, it was no longer a secret. It wasn't exciting anymore, it was just messy. Mark had seemed all in at first. He was the stereotypical guy who loved the idea of swooping in and saving Emily from the mundane routine of marriage. From what I gathered, he was some mid-level finance guy who thought his charm and a few fancy dinners were enough to make him irresistible. For a while it worked. Emily couldn't stop gushing about how fun and adventurous he was, like she was dating some kind of celebrity instead of a guy who probably spent his mornings stressing about spreadsheets. But once their relationship became public knowledge, Mark started pulling back. It was subtle at first. Emily didn't notice right away, probably because she was still riding the high of having her freedom. But I noticed. She'd come home after spending hours waiting for him to call, looking irritated and distracted. One night, she came back from what was supposed to be a date, muttering to herself and slamming the door a little harder than usual. She tossed her purse on the counter and let out an exasperated sigh. "Mark's such a jerk," she said, like I was supposed to ask what happened. I didn't even look up from the paperwork I was reviewing. "Shocking," I said dryly. She shot me a glare, but didn't say anything. Instead, she poured herself a glass of water and sat at the table, scrolling through her phone like she was trying to find something, or someone, to make her feel better. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Over the next couple of weeks, it became obvious that Mark was losing interest. He stopped texting her altogether at one point, which sent her into a spiral. I'd catch her pacing the living room late at night, clutching her phone like she was waiting for some life-changing message. Sometimes she'd mutter under her breath, "Why is he doing this?" Or, "He said he was different." I couldn't help but smirk. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I walked into the kitchen and found Emily sitting at the table with her laptop open, staring at a blank email draft. Her phone was next to her, and she kept glancing at it like she was hoping it would ring. "Something wrong?" I asked, feigning concern. She let out a frustrated sigh. "Mark's been distant." I said, pretending to care. "That's too bad." She looked at me like she was expecting me to offer some kind of comfort. When I didn't, she huffed and went back to her laptop. I knew why Mark was pulling away. It wasn't hard to figure out. Guys like him thrive on the chase, on the excitement of sneaking around and being the forbidden fruit. Once that was gone, once their relationship was no longer this big secret, he got bored. Emily wasn't his escape anymore. She was just another woman with baggage. I wasn't about to tell her that, though. Let her figure it out on her own. A few days later, she tried calling him while I was in the next room. I couldn't hear everything, but her tone said it all. She sounded desperate, trying to act casual, but clearly fishing for reassurance. From the snippets I caught, it went something like this. "Hey, I was just wondering if you wanted to grab dinner this weekend?" "Oh, you're busy." "That's okay, maybe next week." "No, I get it. Work's crazy. When she hung up, I heard her sigh loudly, followed by the unmistakable sound of her phone being tossed onto the couch. The next few weeks were a series of Emily trying to rekindle whatever spark she thought she had with Mark. She'd send him long texts, only to get short, curt replies hours later. Sometimes he wouldn't reply at all. She tried dressing up more, putting in extra effort before her dates, only to come home earlier and earlier each time, looking defeated. I think the moment it really hit her was when she showed up to his place unannounced one evening. She'd told me she was meeting him for dinner, but when she came back less than an hour later, I knew something had gone wrong. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated, then muttered, "He wasn't home." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he know you were coming?" She didn't answer, just grabbed a glass of water and disappeared upstairs. From that point on, she stopped talking about Mark altogether. No more gushing about his sense of humor or how he made her feel alive. She started spending more nights at home, scrolling through her phone like she was searching for some kind of distraction. One night, while I was putting the kids to bed, Ava asked, "Why is Mom so sad lately?" I paused, not sure how to respond. "She's just going through some stuff," I said carefully. "Did she lose a friend?" Ava pressed. "Something like that," I replied, giving her a quick hug. It wasn't a lie. In a way, Emily had lost a friend, one she probably thought would stick around forever. But that wasn't my problem. As Emily's world with Mark crumbled, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it proved what I'd known all along. She'd gambled with our marriage, with our family, and she'd lost. Now she was left picking up the pieces, while I kept moving forward, one step closer to the life I deserved. When I finally decided to file for divorce, it wasn't an impulsive decision. I'd spent months preparing, documenting everything, and making sure I had my ducks in a row. Every late night Emily spent with Mark, every time she missed dinner with the kids, every dollar she spent on herself while I was footing the bill, it was all meticulously logged. I knew that without a prenup, I was walking into a minefield, but I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. The day the papers were served, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I knew what was coming. The tears, the arguments, the inevitable guilt tripping. Sure enough, Emily called me less than an hour after the server dropped off the envelope. Her voice was shaky, a mix of anger and desperation. "What the hell, Max?" she said, not even bothering with a hello. "You're filing for divorce? Just like that?" "It's not just like that, Emily," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "You've had your fun. This marriage has been over for a long time. You just didn't want to admit it." She tried to argue, claiming we could work things out, but I wasn't having it. The time for fixing things had passed. Later that evening, when I got home from work, she was waiting for me in the kitchen. The kids were in their rooms, thankfully oblivious to the tension brewing downstairs. Emily had the papers spread out on the counter, her face red and tear-streaked. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice breaking. "We can fix this. I'll stop seeing Mark. I already have." It was stupid, Max. I wasn't thinking. I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. "You weren't thinking? That's your excuse? You've been not thinking for months, Emily. I gave you every chance to stop and you didn't. He ditched you. Now it's done." She started crying harder, insisting she didn't want to break up our family. "Max, think about Ava and Liam. They need us. Both of us. We can't just throw everything away." I sighed, tired of the same script she'd been using since the day I caught her. "You threw it away, Emily. The moment you decided Mark was more important than your family. Now you want to act like this was my choice? You're the one who wrecked this, not me." Her tears quickly turned into anger. "Fine. If this is what you want, then don't come crying to me when the kids hate you for splitting up their family." That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show. "The kids will be fine," I said firmly. "I'm making sure of that." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of court filings, custody hearings, and tense negotiations. Emily tried to paint herself as the doting mother who deserved primary custody, but my lawyer was prepared. We presented evidence of her neglect. The missed school events, the nights out with Mark, the hotel stays. It wasn't pretty, but it was the truth. To her credit, Emily didn't outright deny anything. She knew the evidence was airtight. Instead, she tried to pivot, claiming she'd made mistakes but was still the better parent. The court didn't buy it. When the judge ruled in my favor, granting me primary custody of Ava and Liam, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. The kids would stay in the house they'd grown up in, with the stability they needed. Emily got visitation rights every other weekend and one night during the week. As for the financial side of things, I'd braced myself for the worst. Without a prenup, I knew she'd be entitled to something, but I wasn't about to let her drain me dry. In the end, the court awarded her a small amount of spousal support, just enough for her to get by, but nowhere near what she'd probably hoped for. When the final ruling came down, Emily looked completely deflated. Her confident facade had crumbled, replaced by the realization that she wasn't walking away with everything she'd expected. Afterward, as we left the courtroom, she stopped me in the hallway. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't want it to end like this, Max. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at her, trying to summon some kind of sympathy, but all I felt was exhaustion. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you invited someone else into our marriage," I said. Then I walked away without looking back. Starting over felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. I hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying until the divorce was finalized, and Emily was officially out of my daily life. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up wondering what drama the day would bring. The house was quieter now, but in the best way. No more tension, no more silent treatment, no more passive-aggressive comments. Ava and Liam adjusted faster than I thought they would. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, and I did everything I could to keep their lives stable. I made sure the routines stayed the same. School drop-offs, bedtime stories, weekend hikes. The difference now was that I could be fully present for them without constantly dealing with the mess Emily had created. The first few weeks were a little rough, though. I think Ava, being older, understood more of what was going on. She'd ask questions like, "Is Mom ever coming back?" Or, "Did you and Mom stop loving each other?" Those were hard conversations, but I kept it honest without throwing Emily under the bus. "Your mom and I just want different things now," I told her one night as I tucked her in. "But that doesn't change how much we both love you and Liam." It seemed to satisfy her for the moment, though I knew the questions would come up again as she got older. Liam, on the other hand, was more focused on the day-to-day. As long as I was there to kick the soccer ball around with him and make his favorite pancakes on Saturday mornings, he was happy. Emily moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It was a far cry from the house we'd built together, but that wasn't my problem anymore. She picked up a part-time job as a receptionist at a local dentist's office, which I'm sure was humbling for someone who used to spend her days planning elaborate Pinterest parties and talking about her freedom. Occasionally, she'd send me a text. At first, it was about the kids, what time their school events were, how their grades were, that sort of thing. But every now and then, she'd drop a hint about wanting to start over or fix things. I kept my responses short and to the point. I wasn't about to reopen that door. Chloe, on the other hand, became a bigger part of my life. She was great with Ava and Liam too. She didn't try to replace their mom, but she made an effort to be a positive presence in their lives. Ava loved having someone to talk to about art and music, and Liam thought it was cool that Chloe knew how to fix a flat tire on his bike. It was nice to see them happy again, surrounded by people who cared about them. One day, Chloe and I took the kids on a day trip to a nearby state park. We hiked, had a picnic, and let the kids splash around in the creek. On the drive home, Ava leaned over to me and whispered, "I like Chloe. She's nice." That one comment made everything feel worth it. Meanwhile, Emily's life didn't seem to be going as smoothly. I'd hear things through mutual friends, or the occasional offhand comment from Ava. She was struggling to keep up with her bills, trying to balance work with her visitation schedule, and unsurprisingly, Mark was long gone. One evening, while picking up the kids from her apartment, I got a glimpse of just how much her life had changed. The place was small, just 2 bedrooms, and cluttered with furniture that looked like it came from a clearance sale. She tried to play it off, saying things like, "It's cozy," but the forced smile on her face told a different story. Ava and Liam didn't seem particularly excited about their visits with her, which I couldn't blame them for. Emily was more focused on her phone than on spending quality time with them. Once, Ava mentioned that her mom had been texting someone a lot during their dinner together. I didn't press for details, but it wasn't hard to guess that Emily was trying to fill the void Mark left behind. As for me, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. My business was thriving now that I wasn't distracted by drama, and I finally had time to focus on the things that mattered. Every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering how things might have turned out if Emily hadn't cheated, if she hadn't suggested an open marriage, if she'd just been honest about what she wanted. But those thoughts didn't linger. I knew I was better off now, even if the road to get here had been messy. One afternoon, while organizing the garage, I came across an old photo album Emily and I had put together years ago. It was full of pictures from our early days. Road trips, holidays, the kids' first birthdays. I closed the album and put it back on the shelf. That chapter of my life was over, and I had no intention of reopening it. Emily wanted freedom. She wanted the excitement of something new, something different. What she got was an open door, one I gladly walked through. Now I had my freedom, my kids, and a future I was actually excited about. As for Emily, well, she's left with the consequences of her choices. And to be honest, I don't feel the slightest bit sorry.